Welcome to the Fin 9.2 Journal Entry webinar. I'm one of your hosts, Michael Edwards. I'm going to introduce us real quick. I'm Michael Edwards. I'm a multimedia designer and developer here with the Controller's Office. And our primary trainer today will be Lisa Vlad, and she's our Finance Learning Specialist. So nice to put a face to a name. We have a little bit of an agenda today. We have basically two parts to this training. For the first section, we're going to be talking about online journal entry, and that may take up to 40 minutes. We might be done a little early. It just depends how quickly we get through. Either way, we will have a break and we'll reconvene at 1:50 to talk about Spreadsheet Journal. And we'll return to this agenda in between sections. A few other things before we jump into the webinar. We have a handout we've provided. If you look in the handout section of the GoToWebinar window, you might have to pop it down if it's collapsed, but we have a handout that's 6 things to know about journal entry. So that's good to take with you. If you forget to download it, we'll send it out again later, so don't worry. We also have a question box, which we'll be pausing at certain points in the webinar and being able to take live questions. So we'll indicate when those moments are happening, and you can use this little box to type in your question. If you have any problems with audio, you can call in via phone using this phone number and access code. So I'll leave this up for about 30 seconds in case anyone needs to write this down. And sometimes it's just easier to use a phone for consistency. If you decide later in the webinar you need to call in, check the email reminder for this webinar. It'll have these numbers too. All right, a few more seconds in case anyone's writing this down. All right. We're also recording this webinar, so if you want to revisit this information or you want to send this to one of your colleagues, we'll be getting in touch probably within a week after the end of the webinar, and the handout and the recording and everything will be packaged in a nice email. We're also going to have some polls and interactivity during this webinar, and in fact, let's try one right now just so you can get a feel for how these work. So this will be a poll question. Are you an approver or a creator? So we got about 75% of you have voted. 86%. Give you guys a few more seconds to vote. And now I'm going to close the poll and show you the results. So overwhelmingly, most of you here are creators rather than approvers of journals. All right, so that's how polls work. We'll have some other poll questions throughout. All right. So I'm going to hand it over to Lisa, and we're going to get started.
Okay, hi everyone. As Mike stated, my name's Lisa. I'm the Finance Learning Specialist from the System Controller's Office. And may be asking why we're all here. And the reason why we're all here is on December 10th, we are transitioning to PeopleSoft Fin 9.2. So what we're going to be talking about today is we're going to talk about how to actually create a journal online in Fin 9.2. We'll talk about adding attachments, how to create a reversal journal, how to edit and resolve journal errors, and then how to utilize journal approvals and workflow. And then we'll be taking the break, and then we'll reconvene at 1:50, and then we'll talk about how to configure and create a spreadsheet journal. So in that part, we'll actually be talking about how you're going to use an Excel template to import a journal into the finance system. What you're going to notice with 9.2 is it's going to have a similar look and feel to Fin 8.4. There's just going to be a few differences and a few key new features, which is what we'll be covering today. So the first thing to note is with journals in 9.2, they're all going to start from the same place. So what that means is right now in 8.4, if you do budget journals or cash transfer journals or gift fund journals, you actually have to go to different links within the finance system. In 9.2, you're going to start all of your journals from the same place. The best place to start it is from that General Ledger Work Center. So if you remember, for those of you who took the Fin Overview course or watched the webinar, your General Ledger Work Center is going to be on the left side of your screen on the home page when you log into 9.2. Within that Work Center, you're going to see this link here that says Create Update Journal Entries. That's how you're going to start all of your journal entries. So we can go ahead and click on that. Now, if you note in this screenshot, I've actually minimized my Work Center to give me more room here to start my journal. You'll see that we do have a new tab here. This looks very similar to what you would see in 8.4, but in 8.4 you only have two tabs. You only have that Find an Existing Value tab and the Add a New Value tab. In 9.2, you're going to have the Keyword Search tab, which we cover in the Overview course, and you can also see that in the recorded webinar for the Fin Overview. So to create a journal in 9.2, you're going to do exactly what you would do in 8.4, is you would click this, you would click this Add button to add a new journal. And then here you're going to come to the header page. Now this looks very similar as well to what you see in 8.4. Just a few things to point out. The business purpose is now called long description. It's the same thing. It also still has that 254 character limit, but something that's really nice in 9.2 that you don't have in 8.4 is as you type your description in, it actually counts the characters down for you. It doesn't wait until you're finished typing. Something else to point out is if you do any sponsored project journals or gift fund journals, you'll notice that that certification statement is no longer there. And that's because we've accounted for that in a workflow verification step, which we'll cover a little bit later on. Something else to note is that you do now have this ledger group here. Here it's going to default to actuals. If you do budget journals or encumbrance journals, you would actually select a different ledger to do those types of journals. This is why you can start all journals in the same place rather than having to go to different links within the finance system. And it's because you actually select your ledger group to indicate what type of journal it is that you're creating. Your journal source here is going to default based on your user ID. You'll notice here that on the header, we have a new link for attachments. So in 9.2, you can actually add supporting documentation directly to the transaction itself. So right now in 8.4, if you have support for your journal, you're probably sending it via a separate email to your approver. But in 9.2, you can actually attach it right to the journal itself. It's very, very similar to attaching a document to an email. Here you'll notice that the number of attachments that are on here is going to be in parentheses. So to add an attachment, you would click on this attachments link. You would select Add Attachment, and then you would select Choose File, and you would locate where you have this saved on your computer. So then you would select the file that you want, and you would click Open. And then you would select Upload. When you do that, it gives you an opportunity to write a description for the attachment, and then you would click OK. Now with attachments, you can add and delete attachments up until the journal's posted. Once the journal's posted, you can't delete anything, but you can keep adding attachments to it. So you can add and remove attachments up until it's posted. Once it's posted, you can only add to it. If I did want to delete an attachment, where I could go is by clicking on that attachments link. I get to the screen here, and then I would scroll over to the right and I would click the minus sign to go ahead and remove that attachment. Once I've added an attachment, you'll notice here that now in parentheses, it has the number 1 for one attachment out there. Now for those of you who are approvers, a frequent question that I've received as well as an approver, if someone adds 5 separate files to this, does that mean that I will have 5 separate attachments I have to click on to view them? And the answer is yes. So if you only want to have to click on one attachment to see everything, you may want to encourage your creators to combine everything into one file when they add the attachment to the journal. So we're going to go ahead and do a quick quiz. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mike.
All right, our first quiz question is a true-false. I'm going to launch it here. True or false, I can remove attachments after a journal has been posted. Let's see, about 70% of you have voted. You guys are fast. 90%. I'll give a few more seconds for the last stragglers. All right, let's see how you answered. Close and share. And 13% of you said true, and 88% said false. That adds up to over 100. That's weird. In any case, I'm going to have Lisa tell us what the answer is to this question.
Okay, so the answer is false. So after a journal's been posted, you cannot remove attachments that have been added. You can, however, continue to add attachments to a transaction once it's been posted. You just can't remove anything that's been added to it. You'll notice under the attachments link on the header, you see something that says reversal. So in 8.4, if I wanted to create a reversal for a journal entry, so hypothetically, let's say in 8.4, at the time that you create a journal, if you knew that you eventually wanted it to be reversed at a future date, you would still actually have to go in and copy the journal and reverse the signs to have it reversed at a future date. In 9.2, if you know at the point in time when you are creating the journal that you eventually want it to be reversed at some point in the future, you can actually have that set up when you create it to go ahead and reverse at that future date. So to do that, what you would do is you would click this reversal link. Now notice right now the reversal link says reversal, do not generate reversal. And that's going to be the default that every journal that you create, unless you indicate otherwise, it's not going to create the reversal for you. But let's say that I want it to. I would go ahead and click on this link here. And then here I can indicate when I want this to actually reverse at some point in the future. So in this example, I'm going to say that, you know what, I know I do want this to go ahead and reverse at the beginning of next period. So I'm going to select beginning of next period, and then I'm going to hit OK. You'll now notice then that my reversal link on the header, rather than saying do not generate reversal, it's saying reversal. I'm going to go ahead and generate that reversal at the beginning of next period. So from here, now that we've completed our header, we're going to go ahead and go to the lines page. Here you'll see the lines page, and again, this should look very familiar to you. This is very similar to 8.4. One item to point out is that you may have the scroll bar here to go through when you enter your fields. Here you're going to enter your speed type account and amount to create your journal. And then you can go ahead and add your lines here. Now, something to point out is if you are using a project-related speed type, you're going to have a new required field that's going to be entitled Analysis Type. Your PC business unit is going to automatically populate for you. So if you do any sponsored project or project-related journals, you're going to have a new field that is called Analysis Type. Now I'm going to turn this over to Mike, and we're going to do another quick quiz question.
Our second quiz is another true or false question. So let me launch this here. True or false, I can create a reversal for my journal entry at the same time I create the journal entry. Over half of you have voted. Up to 80%. All right, a few more seconds for the last voters. All right, let's see the results. So overwhelmingly, you guys voted for true, and this time it adds up to 100%, so that's good. So Lisa, what was the answer to this?
Okay, so the answer is true. So when you're creating a journal in 9.2, you can go ahead at the time that you're creating it, indicate that you want it to be reversed at a future date. You still have the ability, if you realize after you've created a journal, later on you realize that maybe you had created it in error and needed to reverse it, you can still go ahead and use that copy and reverse signs function as well in 9.2. So the next thing you would need to do in 9.2 with your journal is you normally in 8.4 you would do something that's called validate. And so the first time that I got into 9.2, I knew I was going to be teaching this class. So I'm like, okay, I've got all my lines in here. The next thing I need to do is validate the journal. And I went to the process drop-down menu and I couldn't find validate journal. And the reason for that is it's now referred to as edit journal rather than validate journal. It's doing the same thing. It's running those fund account combinations. It's checking to make sure that your debits equal your credits, and it's making sure that you have all required fields filled out. So what you would do is it's actually going to default to be edit journal in the process drop-down menu. So you could just go ahead and click process. Once your journal has been edited, it's going to change the status. Now your status is the same as it is in 8.4. N means that it has not been edited. E means that there are errors on it. And V means that it has been edited and it is in a valid status. And you would see that here in the lower right-hand corner. You also have this feature here that is called Notify. So at this point in time, now that your journal is in valid status, if you just wanted someone to take a look at this and to see that this has been complete, you could select this notify button and indicate the email address of who you want to notify that this is out there. So now we're going to take a break and we're going to answer some questions.
So just a reminder, there's this little text box at the bottom of the GoToWebinar window where you can type your questions and submit them. And we'll just take our time. I see that we already do have one question we can get to. This is question is, what type of files can you upload as attachments?
That's a great question. So right now with types of files, there has not been any limit. I've been able to do Word docs, Excel files, PDF files, GIF files, PNG files. Where that will impact the type of file that you have attached is actually how it shows up when you view it. So depending on the file type, the attachment's either going to show up as a new window or a new tab in your browser, or it may show up in the lower left-hand corner as a download. The other thing to mention too is that there hasn't been any, we haven't broken the system yet in regards to file size that you can attach. So if you do happen to get a size limit error, let us know, but you shouldn't have any problems with that.
It is probably a good idea to stick to traditional formats, Word, Office, PDF, or image files.
Okay. Now, another question is, why would you want to reverse a journal after you create it? So the times when you know that you would need to be creating a reversal journal, so at the time when you're creating a journal, when you know that you would want it to reverse and at a future date would be if you're doing manual accruals. So keep in mind that most of the accruals at fiscal year end are done at the system level, but your department may do a few at your level. So that's when you would want to create a reversal journal at the same time that you're creating the initial journal. Is there a limit to how many files I can attach? I believe we addressed that with the size limit, but as of now, we have not found it. So if you do, let us know. Another question, what happened to the printer icon? That is a great question. So you no longer have that printer icon on the lines page to print the journal, but you can still select print from the process drop-down menu to go ahead and print the journal. To address the question, can we see an example of a sponsored project journal? I would love to be able to provide that to you, but we're going based off of a PowerPoint presentation rather than the live system. So I would encourage you to sign up for an in-person session, and you could get into the system then and play around with it at that point in time. Do approvers automatically receive email notifications after a journal is created? So Joyce, I'm going to answer your question in two parts. The first part is no. When a journal entry is just created, your approver is not going to receive an email notification that it's out there. They will, however, receive an email notification when you submit the journal, which we're going to be covering shortly right after this question session. This question, I might need a little clarification on it. It's since you can't remove an attachment, can you delete the journal entry and then start again? Now remember that you can delete attachments up until the transaction has been posted. So once the transaction has been posted, you wouldn't be able to actually delete the journal entry either. So you would just have to correct the error. So just keep in mind that once an attachment's on a journal that has been posted, it's going to be out there. You won't be able to delete the journal or to be able to remove the attachment at that point in time. Another question about access. So do I need to do anything to keep my access in FIN 9.2? The answer to that is no. If you have access in 8.4, you're going to have access in 9.2. So another question, do we still need to email finance journal submission with an attachment of the journal and documentation? JD, I am going to refer you to your campus controller's office. That is a campus-specific process. Another question, what information do we need to provide in the new analysis field for those project-related speed type journals? With that, there's going to be a few options. It's going to be GLE or GLR or balance. One, the GLE means that it is expense related. GLR means that it's revenue related, and BAL means that it's balance sheet related. And we're going to have that information posted on our website for you as well. Got another comment here that I like the new journal entry navigation. I agree. I like that as well. Keep in mind, if for some reason you don't have that create update journal link in your work center, you can still navigate through the main menu to general ledger and journals the way that you do now to create the journal. I think it looks like that's all of the questions there. Looks like we got all of them?
We will have another chance later in case you have other questions for us.
Okay, so we're going to continue. So a question I had in there was, will your approver automatically be notified when you create the journal? And I said no, but they will be notified when you submit the journal. And that's a new process that we are going to be doing in 9.2. So you see this cartoon here. It says, I think I've discovered the bottleneck. And the reason why I put that out there is right now in 8.4, when you have a journal that's out there that needs to be approved, you're somehow yourself having to notify your approver that it's out there. You're having to email them, call them, pop in their office and let them know that it's out there. Well, in 9.2, we're going to be using something that is called workflow. And workflow refers to the way that transactions are going to be routed through the system for approval. What that means for you is you're going to actually be submitting the journal through the system. And when you do the submit process, you're going to enact workflow. And then the system is going to send an email to your approver letting them know that the transaction is out there to be approved. In addition to that, that transaction is going to show up on their work list. Here you'll see in the process drop-down menu, you can select Submit Journal and click Process. When you do that and it has been submitted, you get this very brief saved pop-up in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. It's very quick. So where you may want to go instead is you can go to the Approval tab to actually click the Submit button on the Approval tab here. And when you do that, you will then see this approval stages that will let you know that it is pending approval. Something to mention too is unless you have been notified otherwise, whoever's your approver now should be your approver in 9.2. This is being set up by all the campuses specifically. So if you have any questions or concerns about who's going to be approving your transactions on your campus, go ahead and contact your campus controller's office. Something else to point out here is you see this approval stages here, and you have this box here that says multiple approvers. If there were multiple stages of approval for this transaction, such as for a sponsored project journal or a gift fund journal, you would actually see multiple boxes listed here. So each box that you see here represents one stage or one level of approval. If I actually wanted to see here, it says multiple approvers. So if I wanted to see who is actually listed as an approver on this transaction, I could click this link here that says multiple approvers. And when I do that, I can see who all has the ability to approve this transaction. So in this example, when I clicked submit and went through the submit process to enact workflow, the system sent an email to user number 16, 15, and then to David and Karen as well, saying that this transaction is out there awaiting their approval. So let's go ahead and take a minute and answer any questions that you may have about workflow and approvals.
There's a question here. When you copy a journal entry, will it copy the attachment?
Oh, that's a great question. I'm going to have to actually find that out for you. I'm not sure if it copies the attachment when you copy a journal or not. So let's find out on that, and we can get back to you on that. So another question is, how do you add approvers to a journal? So for journals, if you are an approver, you have the ability to add an additional approver. If you are the person who's creating it, that approver is already going to be identified for you. So there's a few options that you have available to you. Rather than adding an approver, you can use the notify button to let the person know that the journal is out there. They won't have the ability to approve it unless they're listed as an approver, but they will have the ability to actually see the transaction. So keep in mind that these approvers are being identified by our campuses. Another question is, what happens if I don't hit submit? Well, then the journal's not going to be routed for approval. So you do need to hit submit to route the journal for approval. Okay, I see another comment here about who typically approves the journal. Keep in mind that this is very campus specific, and we have people from all campuses on here. So I can't specifically address how it's going to work at your specific campus. What I would recommend is if you have any concerns to contact your campus controller's office. Another question, will there be automatic routing of approval for Fund 30s? So for your sponsored project journals, remember that the reason why we no longer have that certification statement is because that's being addressed through a workflow verification step, which means for those journal types, there's going to be multiple stages of approval, which are going to be built in for you. You will still need to submit the journal to kick off the workflow process, but that will be automatically built in for you. And yes, that does apply to Fund 34s as well. Okay, another question, as an approver, how do I add the next and a multiple level approval? We will be covering that in just a few moments. Yes, you can see who the approvers are on your screen. Let me see if I can go back a slide to show you that. Oops. So here you can click on the multiple approvers, and then you can see who is actually the approver that this has been routed to. Okay, we'll just give it another minute for questions. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and move on here, and now we're going to view this from the approver standpoint. So for those of you who are approvers, what's happening now is the people who've created the journal have submitted it through the system to enable workflow. When they did that, you got an email as the approver from the system saying that this transaction's is out there for waiting for your approval. That transaction is also on your work list. So what your work list is when you log into 9.2, you're going to see in the upper right-hand corner a link that says work list. When you click on the work list link, you're going to see the list of transactions that are awaiting your approval here. So where you're going to go from here is you're actually going to click right on the link to the transaction itself. And then there's a few things that you can see on this screen. Here you can click on attachments to view the attachments. You can click on the file name, and then here you'll see the attachment. You could go to the journal entry page itself, but you really don't need to. You can do everything from this screen. You can click on this journal lines here at the bottom, and then click on this other button here to be able to see both the dollar amount and chart field information on the same page. So here you're going to see all of the detail for your journal right here on this page. And then here's where you're going to do a few things to the transaction. You can click approve. When you click approve, it's going to approve the transaction and it's going to remove it from your work list. Now here, if there were another stage of approval, if you were to click approve, it would then route it to the next stage of approval. In this example, we only have one level of approval, so when you click approve, the transaction is approved. You can also deny the transaction. So if you deny the transaction, it's going to send it back to the work list for the person who submitted it and created it. And then at that point in time, they have the option to go into their work list and either delete the transaction or edit it and resubmit it. You also have this hold button. So what this hold button is if you remember on this journal, there were 4 approvers at this stage of approval that had the ability to approve this transaction. So hypothetically, let's say that Mike and I were both approvers at this level, and I had a question on this transaction. If I didn't put it on hold, Mike could come in and approve it. So what I would want to do is while I was waiting to get my question answered, I'd want to click hold here and get my question answered. When I do that, it actually takes it off of Mike's work list, and he wouldn't be able to see it once I placed it on hold. You can also add comments here as well. Now, someone had asked the question, now how do I add someone as an additional approval? One thing I just want to reinforce with that is just keep in mind that journals that require multiple stages of approval, such as sponsored project journals and gift fund journals, are going to already have the multiple stages of approval built into it. So this would just be if just for this specific transaction you wanted to go ahead and add another approver. You would click this green plus sign here. And then here you would search for the user ID. I recommend using the search because the default's going to be their user ID. And I don't remember my approver's ID numbers. So I would click the magnifying glass so that I could search by name. And then I would click insert. Once you do that here, you'll see that it adds this additional level of approval. I would click Save Approval Flow Changes, and then if I wanted to actually get it routed, right now it says it's not routed. That's because I myself have not approved this yet. So I would need to go ahead and approve this, and then it would route it to the next level of approval. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mike, and we're going to take another quick quiz.
All right, this is our third quiz question. This one's not true or false. It's what does it take to launch workflow? Which of these actions will launch workflow? Edit the journal, submit the journal, print the journal, or call your approver. About 3/4 of you have voted. See if the last 25% wants to participate. All right, we're up to 85%. A few more seconds. All right, let's check out the results. So 9% said edit the journal, 90% said submit the journal, no one said print the journal, good, and 2% said call your approver. So Lisa, what's the answer to this?
I'm actually really glad that 9% said edit the journal because I think I forgot to mention something. And that is, in order for the submit process to work, your journal has to be in valid status. So you won't be able to submit the journal until you edit the journal. So technically, that 9% of you were right. You were just missing the second part of it, meaning that you do actually have to submit the journal to go ahead and launch workflow. So you have to submit a journal that is in valid status in order to launch workflow. So now we're going to take some more time, wrap up here to answer any additional questions that you all may have on anything that we have covered today.
And yet again, a reminder, you have this text box at the bottom of the GoToWebinar window to submit your questions.
Okay, so we do have an answer to your question about the copying a journal. It does not copy the attachments. Thank you, Chris, so much for asking that question because I actually did not know that. So another question is, can we access the testing environment from our desktops? You can access the test environment, but that would be if you were set up as a tester. If you are not set up as a tester, I would actually recommend that you don't go to the test environment, and that's just because you wouldn't be on any of the email notifications that let you know when the environments are being taken down and things like that. Another question, what is the difference between an approver and a reviewer? So an approver can actually approve a transaction. Adding someone as a reviewer just means that they can go in and take a look at it, but they won't have the ability to approve the transaction. So another great question, can the approver write a comment in the add comment session for the reason of the denial of the journal? And yes, you absolutely can do that, and I would recommend that you do that. So as an approver, if you're going to deny a journal, use the add comments part to let the creator know why you're denying it. So if a comment is added by an approver, will the creator of the journal be notified that a comment was added? Yes, you would see that on your work list when it came up. So when you clicked on it from your work list, you could view comments and see the comment as to why that was denied. Another great question, can the person who enters the journal see if the journal is put on hold by one of the approvers? I actually need to get clarification on that. I believe that you can look up the journal and see where it's at in the approval stage, but I'm not sure if it would tell you if it's on hold or not. So I need to get back to you on that. Another question, if there are multiple approvers for a journal, does it put it on all of the approvers' work lists? And the answer is yes. So in the example that we looked at, numbers 15, 16, David, and Karen were all listed as approvers for the first stage of approval for that transaction. It got put on all of their work lists. If David goes in to approve it, however, it removes it from everyone's work lists. Yes, we will have instructions on how to do journals. That's going to be on our website. You'll be getting a thank you email that will have a link to our website that will have instructions on journals. Another question, can the approver add and delete attachments? And the answer to that is yes. So your approver also has the ability to add and delete attachments up until the point in time that the transaction has been, that the journal has been posted. Once it's been posted, you can't remove attachments. So another question is, what happens if I don't submit the journal? Well, then you're not enabling workflow, and it's not going to be able to get approved. Another question is, who is the reviewer? So when you're adding someone as a reviewer can be anybody who has inquiry access to the finance system. So it's basically just letting anybody out there know that you want them to take a look at the journal. And again, it's just saying that you, excuse me, I'm sorry. I'm just,
Yeah, take a water break for
sorry.
a second while we think through our answer here. We are getting close to the end of our time, so after this question, we'll be taking our break. All right, so who are the reviewers?
Okay, so a reviewer can be anyone who has inquiry access. So if the journal stops being visible to other approvers when one person selects it, why is it necessary to press the hold button? So that's not true. Anybody who's an approver can go in and view it from their work list, which is what the purpose of the hold button is that if you don't want them to be able to approve it, you need to place the transaction on hold. John, this is a great question that you have, and this is something that we've been discussing here in our office. And your question is, does the creator receive an email notification when a journal is approved? And currently, the way it's set up, the answer to that is no, but we've been getting overwhelming feedback from people throughout our courses that they do want that. So that is something that is being considered, and I would say stay tuned on that. Now, the question about getting notification from finance if the journal's pending now, that's going to be a question for your campus controller's office on how they're going to be handling that. Okay, so at this point in time, we are going to wrap up the online journal session. We're going to go ahead and take a 10-minute break. For those of you who are staying on for the spreadsheet journal portion of this, just make sure to be back online at 1:50, and we'll go ahead and get started on that. Thank you all so much for your time.
Yeah, there's no need to close any windows. You can just leave the webinar open, and we'll get started again at 1:50. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started with the second part of our webinar, which is Spreadsheet Journal. So Lisa's going to take it from here.
Okay, so welcome to the Spreadsheet Journal part of the class. We're going to go about 40 minutes. We'll also have periodic pauses for questions throughout here. Now, before we start talking about the spreadsheet process, I just want to talk about when you would actually want to use an Excel spreadsheet to import a journal into the finance system. So an example that I like to provide of when I actually have used this process myself is I did a monthly journal that had a ton of lines on it. I would be doing a journal that would have anywhere between 30 and 50 lines to it. And it was kind of cumbersome to go into the finance system online and keep adding all of the lines to it. So instead, I would use the Excel template. Now, the example for which I use this is we had a copy machine that was shared on a floor by about 9 different departments. And within each department, there were 3 people who would use that. So I'm talking, I had about 30 people who were using this copy machine, and they were all entering their copy code. And at the end of the month, I would get the invoice that I would then have to split up and do a journal across the 9 department speed types. And so it was just a pretty lengthy journal that I would have to do. So rather than going in and having to enter it all online, I would use Excel to do this for me. Now, with the process, what you're going to have to do if you choose to use this Excel template to do these journals is the first thing you're going to do is you're going to have to get the files to be able to do this. You're going to have to set up the template, and then you're going to configure the spreadsheet columns. And what that means is you're going to actually put the columns in the order that you want them to be in and what makes sense for you. Then you're going to actually create the journal. And then you're going to import the journal into Fin 9.2. Now you may hear me reference this as uploading because from my point of view, when I'm using the Excel template, I'm uploading information into the system, but the system refers to it as import because from the system's point of view, the system is importing information into the system. So upload, import, whichever way you want to refer to it. And then last but not least, once you get the journal into the system, you're going to have to add attachments to it if they're necessary, edit the journal, and then submit the journal for approval to kick off workflow. So the files that you're going to need to do this is you'll need the journal entry template, you're going to need the log, and the 2 macro files. So the template's where you're going to actually do your work. The log is going to actually record your activity, and that's going to open once you try to import the journal. And then the macro files, you just need them saved in the same location. So for all of these files, in order for this to work, you need to get all 4 of these files saved to the same place on your computer. So once you get these saved onto the same place on your computer, you're going to open the template. And on the template, you're going to see several buttons here. And the first thing you're going to want to do the first time you use this is you're going to want to set this up for your own use. So to do that, you're going to click the Setup button here. Now, when you do that, there's some information you're going to have to enter here. You're going to enter the date. You're going to enter the ledger group. You'll enter your source code, and then you're going to enter your user ID, and keep in mind your user ID goes in both places. Be very careful about how you type the information in here. Some of the most common errors that I've seen when we've been doing this in class have been if people type their source code wrong. So for example, we use source code SC1. I've seen people type in S1C. Well, then you're going to get an error. So just be very careful about how you type everything in here. So once you've set this up for your own use, what you're going to do is you're going to hit OK. And then you're going to save this. So when you save the template, then it's going to be set up for you the next time. So you won't have to go in and do the setup again. You'll just have to do it the first time that you use it and click Save. The next thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to get the columns on the template in the order that you want them to be in. So once you've set up your file and you've saved it, then you'll go into the setup again, and then you're going to go to Configure over on the right-hand side, and you'll click Configure. From here, you'll want to make sure that you're on the Columns tab under this Chart Field Configurations. Now, those of us who, we're probably all fairly savvy in Excel. So a word of caution I want to give to you with this template is that while normally in Excel, if we wanted to move a column, we would just cut and paste it to put it where we want to. With the template, you are very limited to using the buttons of the template itself to move anything around. So just be very careful, because if you come into this template and you try to right-click and cut a column and then right-click and paste it somewhere, it's not going to work for you. So the first thing you want to do if you're going to move one of these columns is you need to use this yellow arrow here to actually get it to highlight the column that you want. So for example, if I wanted to move this amount column, the first thing I would need to do is click the yellow arrow to move it over to select that column. So then I'm going to get that column selected, and then here I'm going to use the white arrow to actually move it. So when I click on the white arrow, it's going to move the column to where I want it to be. So here you'll see that it moved it over one spot. Something else to mention too is you will occasionally see a delete button here under the column. I would really discourage you from deleting anything. What I would recommend that you do instead is to just move the columns that you don't need all the way over to the right so that you just don't even see them. Some of the columns can't be moved. So for example, your business unit and your ledger columns here can't be moved at all. So you won't be able to move those, but you can move the rest of these here. And then just don't delete anything. Just move whatever you don't need over to the right-hand side. So So once you've configured your columns here, you're going to exit, and then you'll go ahead and save your template again. So now this is completely set up for you. The process that we just went through, the downloading the files to the same place on your computer, setting it up by entering your username and source code in your ledger group, and then reordering the columns, you only have to do that the very first time that you do this, unless there's ever a change made to the template. And then if there's ever a change made to the template, you would have to go through the process again. Now, I'm not anticipating us having very many changes to the template itself. I just want to mention that to you. I'm going to turn this over to Mike, and we're going to take a brief quiz.
And it's our favorite, a true-false question. So this is the next to last quiz question we have. So true or false, I will need to save all 4 files for the spreadsheet journal process to the same location on my computer. So far you are all answering exactly the same. Oh, if you chose the other one. About 3/4 of you have voted. I'll give you guys about 10 more seconds. All right, let's check out the answer. So overwhelmingly, most of you chose true. So Lisa, is this true or false?
The answer is true. In order for them to work, you do need all 4 files saved in the same location on your computer. It's going to be really obvious to you if you don't, because you're going to try to go into the template, and if you don't have all 4 files saved there, you're going to get error messages all over the place. So that would be the first thing to check. If you get an error when you're trying to go into the template, just make sure that you do have all 4 files located in the same place. Now, before we get into the actual process of how you're going to create the journal, now that we've gone through the setup, we're going to take a moment to answer any questions that you may have.
So there's a question here. Is there going to be a step-by-step guide for doing journal entries at some point in time?
That is a great question. So we are going to have several things available to you. We're going to have a series of printable resources. So we're going to have one to create how to create an online journal. And then we're going to have a couple that are for setting up and configuring your spreadsheet journal, and also how to create your spreadsheet journal. And then we're also going to have some how-to videos on how to do this. And those are all going to be on our website. Another question is, I thought there were only 3 files. What am I missing? So it does look like there's only 3 files, because you have the template, the log, but then there's 2 macro files. So that's how you get to the 4 files. Another question, I'm not quite sure I understand the question, is how many lines will you be able to view? Currently, it's only 10 lines at a time. I'm assuming you're referring to an online journal with that question. Another great question, do I have to configure the spreadsheet? So keep in mind, configuring the spreadsheet, when you click on configure, means that you're reordering the columns. The answer to that's no. If you like the order that the columns are in, go ahead and use the template as it's set up. Some people have a preference for the order that they want it to be in, so that's why we want to show them how to configure it. Another great question, where do we find the 4 files? So we are going to do a few things with that. They're going to be housed as a zip file on our website, and you can also contact the Finance and Procurement Help Desk for them. Now keep in mind that we don't have the templates for the live system yet, so don't contact, if you want to go the route of contacting the Finance and Procurement Help Desk, wait until go live to get the actual templates for the live system for that. Okay, I think that it looks like we've answered all of the questions here. So just to clarify, a question was, can the Finance and Procurement Help Desk help me set this up? Yes, so not only can they send you the files, but if you have any questions on the process, they can actually help you with the process itself as well. For the question about the lines, I'm going to go ahead and contact you separately after this just so that we can stay focused on the spreadsheet journal part of the webinar. Okay. So now you will have an opportunity for more questions later on. Now we're going to go into the process of how you actually set up or create the journal. So if you'll notice back on that main page that we were on within the template, in the second column for journal sheets, you have this new option. So here, if I want to create a new journal, I'm going to select new. Here I'm going to name the journal sheet. Now this is not naming your actual entry. That's going to be assigned a number once you import it into the system. But what this is it's actually creating a new worksheet within the Excel template. So with that being said, when you name this, you are limited to Excel naming conventions. So you're limited to 29 characters and you can't use any special characters. I recommend just naming it something that identifies it to you as to what journal it is. So that way, if you need to go back in and edit it, you know which worksheet to select to do that. So I'm going to enter my worksheet name here, and then I'm going to select OK. Here you're going to notice that this is the template itself, where you're going to actually create the journal. Now, just like the online journal, you have two sections here. So in the top, you'll see that you have this journal header section, and then here you have the journal line section. So you're just like the way that you do it online, you're going to want to create your header first. So to do that, you're going to click this plus sign here. And in the template itself, when you're in Excel, it's going to be in row 5. You'll click the plus sign. So I'll go ahead and click the plus sign here. Now here you're going to see the header information. This is going to be filled in based on the information you set on the Setup tab. So all of this will be in there for you. So you may need to change the date. This is another great place for you to check the information that you entered. So remember that you want to be very careful about your user ID, your source code, and how you spell your ledger group. Because if there's any spelling errors or transposition errors, you're going to get an error upon import. So here, just make sure that everything looks the way that it should. You're going to enter your description, which then will be the long description for the journal. So you're limited to the 254 characters. And then here, if you want to set this up as a reversal, just like we had done with the online journals, you can go ahead and do that here. So then you're going to click OK. Now the next thing that you're going to do is you're going to add your lines to the journal. Now, there's a few ways that you can do this. The first way that you can do this is you can click this plus sign, and it's going to be in the template itself, it's going to be in row 9 is where you're going to click the plus sign to add the actual journal lines. Now when you do that, there's a few things that you can do. You can also click this plus sign with the multiple dots on it, and when you do that, that's where you can add multiple rows. So clicking just the plus sign only adds one row at a time. But here, going back to that copier example that I had where I had 30 to 50 lines on my journal, this is where I would want to use the plus sign with the multiple dots. And I would indicate, here I would say, okay, well, how many rows do I want to add? So here I'm saying I want to add 30 lines to it. You also have this copy option. So what you can do is, let's say that in the copier example that I had used, I used the same business unit, ledger, and account code for all 30 lines of my journal. So what I would do is I would first click the plus sign to add one line, and then I would enter my unit, my ledger, and my account on the first line. And then I would click this plus sign with the multiple dots on it and say that I want to add 30 lines. But when I add 30 lines, I'm going to check this box to say I want to copy the data from line 1. And then I would click Insert. When I do that, it's going to copy on the new lines all of the information that I entered in the columns that are checked here. So here I'll click Insert, And then here you'll see that I now have my 30 lines on here that are all filled in for me. Something else that you can do is you can add blank lines. So going back to the example, if you know that your journal has 30 lines to it, you can add 30 blank lines, and then you can type everything in here that you need in your first line, and then you can copy and paste down. Now, I had said with the template, you have to be careful that you need to use the template buttons for some things. And the exception to that is once you get all of your lines in here and you get this gray area with all associated with the lines, that's where you can do anything in Excel. You can copy, you can paste, you can use formulas, you can drop and drag. So once you get all of your lines in here, you can use Excel functions all over this gray area here. So I could have just typed in my first line and then copied and pasted it all of the way down. If I want to delete multiple lines, I can also click the minus sign with the 3 buttons here and say which rows I want to delete. Okay, you can also delete one row at a time by just clicking this minus sign here. But if you want to do multiple rows, it's the minus sign with the multiple dots. And then you would say which rows it is that you want to delete, and then you would click delete. So once you get everything in here, I can go ahead and click this Import Now button that is going to be in column K. Here, it's going to show your user ID. Now, keep in mind your user ID that's listed here is your PeopleSoft Finance System ID. Now, you may not actually be aware of what your ID is because we are logging into the finance system through the portal. So if you need help with that, you can contact the Finance and Procurement Help Desk and they can look up your ID for you. You're going to enter your password. Now, the troubleshooting tip here is some people put their caps lock on when they're typing everything in. So when you're entering your password, make sure that your caps lock is not on. And then you're going to hit OK. When you do that, if the journal was imported successfully, you're going to see a screen that looks like this. And on that screen, you're going to actually get the journal ID number. The other thing to point out too is whenever you try to import, your journal log is going to appear as another Excel file at the bottom of your screen. So then you can open the journal log file and you can see here whether your import was successful or if it failed. Now, if it failed, you will get an error message that said why it failed. Some error messages are really, really easy to figure out what it is. So for example, if you only entered a 5-digit account code instead of 6, the error message is going to be pretty straightforward. Some of them are not so straightforward, and I'm going to walk you through ways that you can troubleshoot to figure out where you may have had a fail issue with this. Right now, I'm going to turn it over to Mike, though, and we're going to take a quick quiz.
This will be our final quiz of the day. So this is another true or false question. When my spreadsheet journal is successfully imported, the journal process is complete. True or false? So we got about 70% have voted. A few more seconds. All right, here we go with the answers. So 16% of you said true and 84% said false. So Lisa will tell us what the answer is.
Okay, so the answer is false. So just successfully importing the journal into the finance system doesn't complete the process. So remember that you'll still need to go into the system, add attachments if necessary, edit the journal, and submit the journal. And we'll walk you through that process, but the first thing I want to do is I want to go through some troubleshooting tips for you if you do get an error upon import. So one of the things that you can check is you need to check your setup. So the way that you can check your setup is go to your home. You'll click the home button here. Before you do that, actually just go through the lines very quickly to make sure that you spelled your ledger group correctly, that your account has 6 numbers, that your speed type has 8. Just make sure that you have all of that looks okay. The next thing that you'll do is go to home, check your setup, and then this is where you want to check to make sure that everything's spelled correctly. So I've seen a lot of times in class that people have misspelled the ledger group or had a transposition error on the source code. Another thing to keep in mind is because the setup then goes into the header for the journal, if you change anything here on your setup, hit OK, but then you now need to go into the journal and change the header. So to do that, you're going to select Edit. You're going to select the journal that you are working on. So this is where that naming convention comes in, and you'll highlight the name of the sheet and hit OK. And then to edit the header, you're going to, in the header section, select the red pencil with the line. Select the header for the journal that you're editing and hit OK. And then here you'll come in here and you're going to make any changes here that you need to, and then hit OK here. So those are just some of the most common import fails that I've seen. Then you'll go ahead, once you make the changes, you'll go ahead and import the journal. You'll enter your password and then hit OK. Another troubleshooting tip to do is that keep in mind that you're not editing the journal until after you get it into the system. So a very quick check that you can do is you want to make sure before you even try to import the journal for actuals is that you want your debits to equal your credits before you even try to import it. And the way that you can do that is you can highlight everything in the amount column and it should net to 0. And then you know your debits equal your credits. So now let's go through how you would actually look this up in the system. So now that you have this done, you have your journal ID number from your log file. So then you would go back into the online system, and from your work center, you would select Create Update Journal Entries. You would go to the Find an Existing Value tab, enter the ID, and click Search. From here, you can add attachments if you needed to on the header page, and then you're going to edit the journal, and then you'll submit the journal for approval. So that's the final steps of the spreadsheet process. Here you can see the approval stages for this. So now we'll go ahead and take a few minutes for any questions that you may have.
We do have a few already in here. One was, can we make separate videos on separate parts of the spreadsheet journal process?
I am so glad that somebody asked that question. So we do have separate videos planned. So that is in process, yes. Okay, let me check to see. I know we had a lot of questions come in when we lost audio, so let me just check to see where we were before, if we lost.
Looks like there's one here. It's if the date comes from setup, is the effective date set up to be the same? Why can't it be changed to default to current date?
That is a great question with the template. So the date does default to what you enter on the setup tab, so you will have to change that. In regards to having it default to the current date, that's something we can discuss with the development team. To see if that's something that we can have put in place. Another question is, does everyone with journal entry access have the ability to use the spreadsheet template? And the answer to that is yes. Okay, sorry, I'm scrolling. There's a lot of questions that says no audio, so bear with us as we get to what the current questions are here. Would cache journals be possible using the Excel sheet? And the answer to that is yes. Yes, and you can also do budget journals. You can do encumbrance journals. You can do, you would just then select your specific ledger group for those. Another question is, will the slides be available after this? yes, we are actually recording this webinar, so we will be posting the recorded version of this online, and the slides will be available as well.
Yeah, probably by next week at the latest.
Okay, great. So any other questions on the spreadsheet journal process? Okay, I'll just give it one more minute to see if we have any more questions coming in. Okay, well, something to mention is you will all be getting an email saying thank you for attending the webinar. In that email, you're going to have a link to our website. On our website, you're going to have access to our printable learning resources and also to the videos that we have available. In addition to that, when this recorded webinar is available, that will be out there. You can also look at the calendar to see when additional sessions are available. We are doing one additional day in person at each campus, so you can take a look at that and go ahead and register for that. You can also, when you need help in the live system, you can contact the Finance and Procurement Help Desk. And with that, if we don't have any more questions, I'd just like to say thank you all so much for your time, and I hope that you all have a great day.